We'll call this February 22nd Marshall County Commissioners Board meeting to order. Do we have, there we are. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Barnhart.
Here.
Mr. Coltheis.
Here.
Mrs. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Klein. Ms. Meraz. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Overmeyer. Ms. Sloniker.
Here.
Mr. Hostetler.
Here. Somebody was trying to get in that door, kind of got our attention. Make sure it's not one of our absent members. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Next on the agenda, approval of minutes. We have two different sets of minutes to approve. We can start with the review of the executive session on January 25th. Has everybody had a chance to review these minutes? Any comments?
Yes, I asked to amend those, the executive session minutes, to add that battery storage ordinance was spoken about.
Okay. We talked about that I think if I remember right, in relationship to his job performance, correct? That's what I remember it as. You obviously don't remember it that way. We'll need to, I think, before we do that, because now you're going to get into the details of his job performance, and he has rights in this process too. Do you have, Ty, can you talk to Derek about this before we ask you to amend the minutes?
I can, yes.
Do the rest of the board have a problem with me having our lawyer look into that before we do something that might be illegal? I'd entertain a motion to table that part, please.
I move to table it. I'd second that.
We have a motion and a second to table the minutes for the executive session on January 25th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion class, that part of our agenda is now tabled until the next meeting where we can get some advice from our lawyer before we move forward. The review of the regular session on January 25th, 2024. We've added those in our meeting minutes. Everybody had a chance to look at those? Any comments or concerns?
Motion to approve?
I second that.
I have a motion to approve and a second the regular session meeting on January 25th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion does carry. Okay, next item on the agenda is 24 PC 02, Urich, David, and Julie Williams. Are they here tonight, or you want to give us the lowdown first?
I believe their surveyor is here in attendance.
All right, please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Robert Loy. I'm with Territorial Engineering, 7908 North State Highway 23, Walkerton.
Thank you. Ty?
All right, so the applicant is seeking to create a two-lot minor subdivision. You can see the parcel highlighted here in light blue. Again, you can see the parcel here again on the south side of Hibbard, south of the road and railroad tracks on the east side of Redwood Road. The proposal is to turn that lot into a two-lot subdivision, with the north lot being 2.8 acres and the south lot with the existing dwelling being 3.88 acres. Here you can zoom into a little bit closer to that north side. And this is for a family member. When we went out, there was still snow on the ground. Panning across the property. So the applicant owns a 5.1 acre parcel that is zoned T1 Town Residential. That property is bound on two sides by railroad rights-of-way. The owner is seeking to subdivide the property into two parcels in order to create a new parcel for a family member to return to the area and live at. The minimum lot size is 1 acre with a minimum lot width of 60 feet. The proposed acres are 2.8 and 3.88 acres respectively. All setbacks and minimum lot sizes have been met. So in relationship to the findings, the conformance with the subdivision regulations, natural features, pollution consideration, subdivision layout, and street design are all taken into consideration. For finding number 1, the conformance with subdivision regulations, the proposed subdivision conforms to the subdivision regulations. For finding number 2, the natural features have been considered in review of the proposed subdivision. For finding number 3, air and water pollution have been considered in review of the proposed subdivision. For finding number 4, the subdivision layout shall not have an adverse effect on the public health, safety, and general welfare. And finding number 5, the street design, there are no new streets proposed. So for recommendation, based on the information provided and reviewed by the Technical Review Committee, staff and TRC would recommend approval of the proposed subdivision. Now it is up for board determination.
Do you have anything you want to add to what he had give us?
No, I think Ty covered it pretty well.
Okay. Anybody got any questions? If we have to open up a public hearing for this? I need a motion to open public hearing.
I move to open a public hearing.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to open public hearing for PC, 24 PC-02 Urich and David and Julie Williams. We have, yeah, well, that's right, we need to vote. Sorry about that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Thank you, Matt. I'm getting all excited. All right, anybody here to speak in favor of this proposal? Obviously you do, but anybody here to speak opposed? Any correspondence?
No, sir.
Motion to close public hearing? Any questions for our gentleman sitting here? I'm sorry, should ask that first. Want to close it?
Motion to close?
I'll second.
Have a motion to close and a second this public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Any comments, questions, concerns? We'd have to have a motion to go any further, guys.
I move that we approve 24-PC-02.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second to approve this subdivision, I believe is what it is, correct? We have to roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnhart?
Yes.
Mr. Coltice?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Lonergan?
Yes.
Most of
Yes. You have what you need.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is 24 PC-03 Bennett Gary. Are you here? You want to come up, state your name and address, please?
Hi, my name is Gary Bennett. I live at 14857 12th Road in Plymouth.
Okay. Todd?
All right, so the applicant is seeking to approve a lot line adjustment through minor plat. As you can see, here's a copy of the proposed subdivision, adjusting that minor lot, moving the lot line easternly at a various distance as you move along the property. And that makes more sense when you begin to look here in the satellite imagery. It's moving to kind of take up that additional yard space that's between his existing lot line and the driveway that's owned by the neighbor currently, adjacent to their detached garage. So going out to the property.
Hold it. Was the bright yellow line the old property line?
So the thicker yellow line would be the proposed.
The thicker is the proposed.
Correct.
Thank you.
So the highlighted yellow rectangle, if you will, is what is currently his lot, and he's wanting to kind of envelope that additional yard space to the east.
Okay.
So we went out to the property, took some pictures looking up and down the road, and then beginning to pan across the property. The analysis for this is the applicant is seeking to approve a minor subdivision in order to adjust a lot line between his and the property next door owned by the Millers. The subdivision is required due to the limitations on administrative subdivisions. Should the property have been in the ag district, this process could have been simplified. The lot line is proposed to shift a variation of distances that will follow an existing driveway on the Miller property. For findings, we're considering the conformance with the subdivision regulations, natural features, pollution consideration, subdivision layout, and street design. For finding number 1, the proposed subdivision will meet the requirements set forth in the subdivision regulations. For finding number 2, the due regard has been considered for natural features. For finding number 3, pollution, due consideration has been considered in prevention of air and stream pollution. For finding number 4, the subdivision layout will continue to protect public health, safety, and general welfare. For finding number 5, there are no new streets proposed. And so for a recommendation based on the information provided and reviewed by the Technical Review Committee staff and TRC would recommend approval of the proposal, provided that comments by the surveyor and plan director for edit of drawings are addressed, and they have been addressed as of this week.
Okay.
Board determination.
Okay. Did you have anything you needed to add to what he just told us?
No, he pretty much covered it.
Okay. We need to have a public hearing for this.
I move that we open a public hearing for 24-BC-3.
Have a motion?
I'll second that.
Have a second to open public hearing for 24-PC-03. Bennett? Anybody here speak in favor of this proposal, other than you, Mr. Bennett? Or you're welcome to speak too, I apologize, but I did offer you that already. Anybody here speak against? Any correspondence?
No, sir.
Anybody got any questions for him, specific?
Are you currently maintaining that area?
Yes.
You are? Okay.
It's been that way for 25 years. The Millers owned the house before they bought their neighbor's property. They actually put their landscaping and stuff on it before I bought it. We were told we owned it when we bought it, and now we're just trying to make it legal.
What you thought you had before, you just want to, I get your point.
Gotcha.
So in practice, you've been maintaining it as if it
Oh,
was
yes,
yours?
yeah, I could have just got an easement, but we'd rather good neighbors just purchase it, that way
Sure.
it's done right.
Need to close the public hearing.
Motion to close?
Well, second.
Have a motion and second to close the public hearing for 24-PC-03. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Public hearing is now closed. Questions, concerns?
I move that I recommend exception of 24-PC-3.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this subdivision change. I think that's technically what this is, isn't it?
It's a new subdivision.
It is actually a new
It's a
subdivision.
new subdivision because it wasn't a part of one previously.
Okay. Have a motion and second. We need a roll call, please.
Mrs. Barnhart.
Yes.
Mr. Coltheis.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Swanager.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler.
Yes. You have what you need.
All set?
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention, though.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay, now we're on to 24-PC-04. Amend TRC attendance Article 10. You want to explain that to us, please?
Yeah, so the Planning Commission is seeking to amend the zoning ordinance as it pertains to the attendance requirements for Technical Review Committee meetings. For a quick analysis, the proposal is to amend the zoning ordinance as it pertains to the attendance requirement for Technical Review Committee meetings. The current ordinance reads as follows, that the petitioner and/or representative of the petition shall be required to attend all Technical Review Committee meetings at which their petition shall be reviewed. If the petitioner or their representative is not in attendance, the petition shall automatically be tabled and placed on the agenda for the next appropriate TRC meeting. Staff is initiating this proposal to follow current best practices and the logical requirements for applicants' necessity for attendance. Staff currently does not see a reasonable reason to require applicants to leave work in order to attend a meeting where a specific case may only last 15 minutes or less, when the application or conditions may be able to be met easily. the application or conditions may be able to more easily address these proposals. The proposed language is as follows. The petitioner and/or representative of the petition may be required to attend all technical review committee meetings at which their petition shall be reviewed. If the petitioner or the representative is not present, the petition may be tabled to placed on the agenda for the next appropriate TRC meeting. There may be times when a project of scale will necessitate the attendance of an owner or developer, but the intention is to reduce the unnecessary attendance of an applicant for small projects. So this is based on the review by the Technical Review Committee. Staff and TRC would recommend approval of the proposed amendment and is now up for board recommendation to the county commissioners.
This is just what we've been practicing anyway, this is how we've been handling it anyway, and we're just correcting?
Right, just in terms of best practice, if you were to have a small addition on your house or put up a small shed on your property, anybody that pulls that permit for the Lake District, or if you want to do something on your commercial property or something to that effect, you would need to be in attendance for that. Many times those cases themselves run between 5 and 15 minutes at most. At which point you're essentially asking an individual to take off work to miss a part of their day in order to attend 5 to 15 minutes of a meeting that can easily be addressed with their application showing the proper location and setbacks, or conditions can be set forth by the Technical Review Committee for that application itself.
So actually, I'm putting my terms to what you're saying. If it's such a simple thing that is pretty obvious, it's just going to flow through, they wouldn't necessarily have to be there, take off work for things like that. But if the Technical Review Committee looks at it and concerned, needed to have some questions, it would be tabled until somebody could be there to answer the question.
Correct, if they deem so, yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me, too.
I make a motion to open public hearing.
I'll second
I
that.
have a motion and a second to open public hearing on this change. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Public hearing is now open. Does anybody here want to speak in favor of this change? Anybody here want to speak against this change? Any correspondence?
No, sir.
Make a motion to close public hearing.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to close public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Public hearing is now closed. What's the flavor? We still have to move to approve it.
I'll make a motion to approve 24 PCA 04.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve 24-PCA-04. All those in favor say aye.
No,
Roll call.
Roll call, shoot. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Barnhart.
yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Paul Price.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Lomaker.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler.
Yes. So it's officially changed. Oh, no, we're making a recommendation to the commissioners. Okay. All right, now we have 24 PC-05, Marshall County Plan Commission, an ordinance amending Article 3, 6, and 13 to create a regulation for battery storage systems. Ty,
So,
this will probably take a while.
yes.
Okay.
For those in reference in the audience, there is copies of the battery ordinance on the back desk underneath the scissors, should you want a copy. Otherwise, it's going to be pulled up slide by slide, section by section. But if you wanted a copy for your reference to review, there's copies back there as well. But it'll be a second before we get to it. The Plan Commission is seeking to amend the zoning ordinance as it pertains to battery energy storage systems. The order in which we're going to go through all this is getting into research, specifically into Indiana Code 2214-8. Then there's some additional various sources titled Grid Scale Battery Storage FAQ, UL 9540, Siting and Safety Best Practices for Battery Energy Storage Systems, Energy Storage and Local Zoning Ordinances, an overview of local zoning ordinances for battery energy storage systems. Then we went and looked at some additional community codes and then jumped into NFPA 855. And then there's some research from the TRC desires that will be in there, and then the ordinance proposal will follow. So jumping into the research end of things, under Indiana Code 2214-8, passed in 2023, effective July 1st, 2023, under Public Law 217-2023. There were 10 sections, including authority having jurisdiction, NFPA 855, utility scale battery energy storage system, Department of Homeland Security regulation of installation or expansion of utility scale battery energy storage systems, Department of Homeland Security regulation of operation utility scale battery energy storage systems, utility scale battery energy storage systems, compliance with NFPA 855, utility scale battery energy storage systems, capacity on single enclosure, utility scale battery energy storage systems, floodplain elevation requirement, utility scale battery energy storage systems, emergency response plan and training for local fire department, and adoption of rules by Fire Prevention and Building Safety Commission. A couple of those codes in relationship to Indiana Code 2214-8, NFPA 855, so subsection 2, refers to the 2023 edition of NFPA 855, which is the standard for installation of stationary energy storage systems as adopted by the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA. Subsection 3, utility scale battery energy storage system. A utility scale battery energy storage system means an energy storage system is defined in NFPA 855 that is capable of storing and releasing more than 1 megawatt of electrical energy for a minimum of 1 hour using an AC inverter and DC storage. This does not include foundational or property for the purpose of meeting, offsetting all or a portion of a host energy needs, a battery recycling facility, a manufacturing or storage of batteries by automobile manufacturer. Continued under subsection 4, the Department of Homeland Security regulation of installation or expansion of utility scale battery energy storage systems. New BEST post June 30, 2023 must be approved by IDHS. This also includes expansions of 10% of original capacity. Subsection 5 indicated that Department of Homeland Security regulations of operation utility scale battery energy storage systems. A person may not operate a utility scale battery energy storage system unless the person has first applied for and obtained approval by IDHS to do so with an application that contains a commissioning plan, test, and that complies with NFPA 855. For subsection 6, utility scale battery energy storage system compliance with NFPA 855. A utility scale battery energy storage system must comply with NFPA 855. Under subsection 8, the utility scale battery energy storage system floodplain elevation requirement. If a utility scale battery energy storage system is located less than 1/2 mile from the nearest 100-year floodplain as determined by FEMA's firms, all of the system's equipment must be located at least 2 foot above the 100-year flood or the 100-year frequency flood elevation. Subsection 9 indicated the utility scale battery energy storage systems emergency response plan and training for local fire department. The operator of a utility scale battery energy storage system shall provide a copy of the emergency response plan to the fire department that is responsible for providing fire protection services in the area in which the utility scale battery energy storage system is located, and offer on an annual basis a training session to the members of the fire department. The training offered must provide participating members of the fire department with information regarding the installation and operation of the utility scale battery energy storage system responsibly necessary to allow the fire department to safely and effectively respond to a fire or discharge or threatened discharge of environmental contaminants by the utility scale battery energy storage system. For best research, again, these are some different items we got into, including the grid scale battery storage FAQ, the UL 9540, siting and safety best practices for battery energy storage systems, energy storage and local zoning ordinances, an overview of local zoning ordinances for battery energy storage systems, and community codes. So under the grid scale battery storage FAQ. There's several quotes over the next several slides, pulling information from those articles, battery storage is a technology that enables power system operators and utilities to store energy for later use. There are several battery chemistries that are currently used or under research, including lithium ion, lead acid, redox flow, and molten salt, but lithium ion is the most used chemistry. Battery storage is one of several technology options that can enhance power system flexibility and enable high levels of renewable energy integration. Studies and real-world experience have demonstrated that interconnected power systems can safely and reliably integrate high levels of renewable energy from variable renewable energy (VRE) sources without new energy sources. For rated power capacity is the total possible instantaneous discharge capability in kilowatts kW or megawatts MW. For energy capacity, this is the maximum amount of stored energy in kilowatts kWh or kilowatt hours or megawatt hours MWH. Storage duration is the amount of time storage can discharge at its power capacity before depleting its energy capacity. For example, a battery with 1 megawatt of power capacity and 4 megawatt hours of usable energy capacity will have a storage duration of 4 hours. Cycle life or lifetime, the amount of time or cycles a battery storage system can provide regular charging and discharging before failure or significant degradation. Services from batteries include arbitrage. This involves charging the battery when energy prices are low and discharging during more expensive peak hours. Firm capacity or peaking capacity is peak demand is typically met with high-cost generators such as gas plants. However, depending on the shape of the load curve, BESS can also be used to ensure adequate peaking generation capacity. Operating reserves and ancillary services. There are various categories of operating reserves and ancillary services that function on different timescales, from sub-seconds to several hours, all of which are needed to ensure grid reliability. Transmission and distribution upgrade deferrals. When anticipated growth in peak electricity demand exceeds the existing grid's capacity, costly investments are needed to upgrade equipment and develop new infrastructure. Deploying BESS can help defer or circumvent the need for new grid investments by meeting peak demand with energy stored from lower demand periods, thereby reducing congestion and improving overall transmission or distribution investments. A black start is when starting up, the large generators need an external source of electricity to perform key functions before they can begin generating electricity for the grid. UL 9540 is a standard for safety of energy storage systems and equipment, and it makes references and required by the International Fire Code, International Residential Code, and NFPA 1 Fire Code, all of which require electrochemical ESS or energy storage systems to be listed in accordance with UL 9540. Citing and safety best practices for battery energy storage systems. New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, Energy Storage Association, ESA, and DNVGL, a consulting company hired by Arizona Public Service to investigate the cause of an explosion at a 2 megawatt hour battery facility in 2019 and provided recommendations for mitigating this threat in the future. The most commonly relied upon standards for battery safety are insufficient. To address the threat of thermal runaway described herein and explosion, the report recommends additional steps that should be taken, and these are included in the summary below. And so some of the excerpts included. The siting plan should address undergrounding on-site utility lines, maintaining the site free of vegetation, following noise, height, and setback requirements, fencing or enclosing the site, and installing screening or other measures to minimize visibility impacts. The safety plan should include hazard detection systems, means of protecting incipient fires, and ventilation or cooling strategies for protecting against thermal runaway, fires, and explosions. As a corollary, sound training must be provided to local responders that they are equipped to handle any of these potential emergencies, which require substantially different tactics as safely as possible. BESS should have plans to address extreme weather, earthquakes, or other environmental threats that may occur. The decommissioning plan should include descriptions of the steps that will be taken, a cost estimate, a funding plan, and a contingency plan for handling damaged batteries. The confluence of these factors, changing grid needs, supportive policies, and declining costs has dramatically accelerated the growth of the battery energy storage industry in recent years. While battery fires tend to be high-profile events, they are relatively rare when compared to the number of installations. The Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, maintains a database of fires involving grid-connected BESS from media-reported sources. EPRI's database identifies 14 such incidents in the U.S., according to EPRI 2023. To place that number in context, there were 491 large utility-scale projects in the U.S. as of April 2023, for a fire incident rate of about 2.9%. No BESS fire in the U.S. has resulted in loss of life, and many of the affected facilities were able to resume operation. Some of the lessons learned from BESS fires have guided changes in safety codes that are intended to reduce the impact from future incidents of fires. In the United States, codes and standards are primarily written by standards developing organizations, or SDOs. Examples of SDOs include UL, IEE for standards, and the National Fire Protection Association and the International Fire Code for codes. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, H.R. 3684 in 2021, directed the Secretary of Energy to prepare a report identifying the existing codes and standards for energy storage technologies, and that report is publicly available in accordance with PASS et al. 2022. Typically, a code is a document that guides installation requirements, while a standard is a document that describes the safety requirements of a product and how to perform certification testing. In the energy storage industry, an example of this code and standard relationship is NFPA 1 fire code, requiring the energy storage systems of certain sizes and in certain environments be tested and listed. This code then references the standard UL 9540, standard for safety of energy storage systems and equipment. UL 9540 is the key product safety standard for energy storage systems. The ESS listed to this standard is a requirement in both IFC and NFPA 855. This standard addresses the compatibility of all components and systems, functional safety, enclosures, ventilation and cooling, communications, and fire safety. In addition to the requirement for the listing of UL 9540, there are requirements for the testing to UL 9540A. In a UL 9540A test, thermal runaway is intentionally created so that the test administrators can understand how the cell performs under failure and observes how fires spread throughout the unit. This is used to help design fire safety features and establish safe distance between units to limit propagation should a failure occur. A system that is UL 9540 certified, therefore, is a system designed to contain battery failures and prevent them from spreading to adjacent units while ensuring against explosions. For reference, here is one of the figures from that study showing the different components, including communications and battery management systems, battery rack, cell of the battery, power conversion system, fire and explosion protection, fire and gas detection, overall installation and interconnection, and those associated standards that they're required to meet from the different organizations. Much of NFPA 855 deals with technical detail. Going through the energy storage and local zoning ordinances, much of NFPA 855 deals with technical details that are beyond the scope of planning and zoning, and direct enforcement of the standard is beyond the jurisdiction of many local planning agencies. However, many of NFPA 855's requirements are relevant to zoning considerations, and familiarity with the standard can provide a blueprint for knowing what questions to ask about a project and what conditions to impose or negotiate. Several sections of NFPA 855 are relevant for planning and zoning officials, including 4.3, which is the emergency response plan and training for responders. 4.6 is the use of UL 9540 listed equipment. 4.9 is the fire control and suppression systems. 8.1 is the decommissioning plan. 9.3 through 9.5 is the detailed site and facility construction requirements, and 9.6 is explosion control. A battery storage system has three sources of noise: the inverter, which converts the direct current electricity stored in the battery to alternating current electricity used on the electric grid and vice versa. The transformer, which increases the voltage of the electricity stored in the batteries to the level used on the utility's transmission or distribution system, and the ventilation and cooling system, which maintains a safe operating temperature for the batteries. Several jurisdictions have permitted a large energy storage system, have required an impact study that included, among other things, sound impacts. Those studies have generally concluded that individual inverters, transformers, and ventilation systems generally have sound levels between 60 and 80 decibels when measured at close distance, and according to Burns and McDonald 2019, Loudon in 2015, and Hodgson in 2022, and Plus Power in 2019. 60 decibels corresponds to a normal conversation, and 80 decibels corresponds to the noise level inside a car, in accordance with Britannica 2022. The ultimate noise level experienced by neighboring property owners will depend on three factors: the number of noise-producing components in the project, which increases the noise level, the distance between those components and the property line, and the physical screening, which both decreases the noise level. During normal operations, a lithium-ion system does not emit gases and has no odor impacts on neighboring property owners. During a battery fire, the systems will emit hydrogen, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and various hydrocarbon gases such as methane and propane, according to Bard, Archibald, Marr, and Izokai in 2019. While they are odorless, these gases can create risk of fire and explosion if allowed to accumulate in an enclosed space. Because lithium-ion battery cells and pouches are designed to be self-contained, a lithium-ion BESS will only leak in a failure state. In fact, battery leakage is an early indicator of failure, Liu et al., 2020. During normal operations, therefore, a lithium-ion BESS will not leak chemicals that could contaminate local watersheds. Another emerging energy storage technology, flow batteries, use large tanks of liquid to store energy that pose a different risk profile for leaks. Several early projects using this technology had leakage issues, so local planners may want to ensure that flow batteries are designed to manage this risk. A flow battery will also be engineered with primary and secondary contaminant systems to ensure that any leak does not escape the system's envelope. The primary risk of local environmental contamination associated with battery energy storage systems is the use of water and fire suppression. The water will bind with chemicals released during the fire and carry them into drainage systems where they could contaminate watersheds. This risk supports emerging consensus in the firefighting community outlined above that water suppression should be used sparingly on battery fires for exposure protection. If the local fire department prefers to use water in its response plan, then planners may want to require a severable storm drain connection to ensure that contaminated water cannot leave the site. In an overview of local zoning ordinances for battery energy storage systems, they got into definitions, setbacks, decommissioning plans and funds, size tiers, fencing and visual screening, site plan requirements, permitted zones, noise and lighting, and other requirements. Local zoning and siting regulations for BESS are an emerging landscape. The number of local, city, town, county governments that specifically regulate BESS and their codes of ordinances remain limited, particularly compared to the number of codes that regulate solar PV or photovoltaic. The language from New York's Battery Energy Storage System Model Law, published in 2021 for local governments, including definitions and tier, has been widely adapted outside of New York, including in Massachusetts, Virginia, and Iowa, indicating strong appetite for best practices and templates for local regulators as best projects and policy incentives become rapidly more prevalent nationwide. Here's a list of several of the standards and codes that are governed through ANSI, IEE, NFPA, and Underwriters Laboratories. Would you like me to read this whole list, or would you like me to just leave it up and let you read through them yourself?
Just leave it up for a little while, unless you guys have, let other people have time to look at it, if they didn't pick up a brochure in the back. Obviously, is there another page of these too?
No, it's just the one page. And I'd be happy to share and send this to anybody that wishes. Just reach out to the department and we'll happily send you it.
Wow. You ready to move on?
Ready for the next slide?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we went and reviewed some community codes. The districts we looked into included the town of Carver, Massachusetts, town of East Greenbush in New York, Whatcom County in Washington, and the town of Seneca Falls in New York. Standards of interest included tiers of battery storage, reference to state building code and NFPA 855, road access, clearance space, lighting for safety and security shall be shielded, a 30-foot clear space for vegetation in accordance with 855, setbacks, buffering, fencing, noise, decommissioning plan, and bond, SDS or safety data sheets, emergency operations plan, statement of purpose, applicability, general requirements, and utility lines. Getting into NFPA and local fire regulation, NFPA is a guiding principle in some states is the requirement, but Indiana is one of the few states that have NFPA as best practice and have separate standards for requirements. For NFPA, it's the standard for the installation of stationary energy storage systems. The National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, has been helping to solve some of the planet's toughest safety problems for more than 125 years to remain relevant for over a century as a knowledge and information organization. We've continually evolved their scope of expertise from fire prevention, wildlife preparedness, and electrical safety to hazardous materials, community risk reduction, and public safety, and that came from their About Us section. NFPA 855 has 15 chapters and 8 annexes. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I have brought along a good deal of research from their articles. Their 15 chapters include the administration, the reference publications, definitions, general system interconnections, commissioning, operation, and maintenance, decommissioning electrochemical energy storage systems, a reserved section, fuel cell energy storage systems, superconducting magnetic energy storage, flywheel energy storage systems, storage of lithium metal or lithium-ion batteries, 1- and 2-family dwellings, and townhouse units. It also has 8 annexes, including explanatory material, battery energy storage system hazards, firefighting considerations and operations, overview of energy storage system technologies, permits, inspections, approvals and connections, fire and building codes, a short history on stationary storage battery systems, guidance for suppression and safety of lithium-ion battery energy storage systems, and information references. So some of the definitions that we thought were of interest included authority having jurisdiction, or AHJ, an organization, office, or individual responsible for enforcing the requirements of a code or standard or for approving equipment, materials, and installation or procedure. Energy storage systems, or ESS, one or more devices assembled together capable of storing energy to supply electrical energy at a future time. An energy storage system cabinet is an enclosure containing components on the energy storage system where personnel cannot enter the enclosure other than reaching in to access components for maintenance purposes. And then thermal runaway. Thermal runaway is the self-heating of an electrochemical system in an uncontrollable fashion. The emergency operations plan, as required when exceeding 9.4.1 limits, shall be readily available for use by facility operation and maintenance staff. The plan shall be updated when conditions that affect their response considerations and procedures change, and the plan shall include procedures for safe shutdown, de-energizing, or isolation of equipment and systems under emergency conditions, procedures for inspection and testing of alarms, interlocks, and controls, procedures for response of notification of system alarms, emergency procedures to be followed in case of fire, explosions, explosion, release of liquids or vapors, damage to critical moving parts, or other potentially dangerous conditions, response considerations similar to a safety data sheet, procedures for dealing with ESS equipment damaged in a fire or other emergency event, other procedures as determined necessary by the authority having jurisdiction, and procedures and schedules for conducting drills of these procedures. On the right-hand side is one of the several snippets I've taken out of 855 for reference. This gets into the maximum stored energy under table 9.4.1, showing the difference between different storage system types and the amount of stored energy for those components. NFPA 855 for hazard mitigation analysis, or HMA, shall be provided for review and approved where any of the following conditions are present. Technology is not specifically addressed in Table 1.3. More than one ESS technology is provided in a single fire area where adverse interaction between the technologies is possible. Where allowed as a basis for increasing maximum stored energy as specified in 9.4.1.1 and 9.4.1.2, we're required to address a potential hazard with an ESS installation that is not addressed by existing requirements. We're required for existing lithium-ion ESS systems that are not UL 9540 listed in accordance with 9.2.2.1. We're required for outdoor lithium-ion battery energy storage systems in accordance with 9.5.2.1, and HMA required for projects that exceed 600 kilowatt hours. And then again, on the right-hand side, there's a threshold qualities or quantities per each fire area or outdoor installation. On the left-hand side, it lists the different kinds of battery technologies and the aggregate capacity in both kilowatt hours and I believe it is megajoules. So for NFPA 855, for the SDS for hazardous materials, it shall be posted within sight of the disconnect means of any ESS or at a location approved by the AHJ. And for ESS located outdoors, the means shall be provided to protect the SDS from the weather. Getting into the decommissioning plan, prior to decommissioning, the owner of an ESS or their designated agent or agents shall prepare a written decommissioning plan complying with 8.1.3 that provides the organization, documentation, requirements, and methods and tools necessary to indicate how the safety systems as required by the standard and the ESS and its components will be decommissioned and the ESS removed from the site. The plan shall include overview of the decommissioning process, roles and responsibilities for all those involved in the decommissioning of the ESS and their removal from the site, means and methods corresponding to the decision to decommission the ESS, plans and specifications necessary to understand the ESS, a detailed description of each activity to be conducted during the decommissioning process, procedures for documenting the ESS during decommissioning, guidelines and format for decommissioning checklist and relevant testing forms, and then description of how any changes to the surrounding areas adjacent to the ESS will be protected during decommissioning. Then getting into size and separation, ESS shall be comprised of groups with a maximum stored energy of 50 kilowatt hours each. Each group shall be spaced a minimum of 3 foot from other groups. Outdoor ESS or ESS cabinets shall not exceed 53 foot by 8.5 foot by 9.5 foot to not include HVAC or other equipment. Vegetation control areas within 10 foot of each side of outdoor ESS shall be cleared of combustible vegetation and other combustible growth. Ground covers shall be permitted to be exempt provided that they do not form a means of readily transmitting fire. Clearance to exposures, ESS located outdoors shall be separated by a minimum 10 foot from the following exposures, including lot lines, public ways, buildings, stored combustible material, hazardous material, high-piled stock, and other exposure hazards not associated with electrical grid infrastructure. And here's another table titled Electrochemical ESS Technology Specific Requirements, where it goes through across the top the different battery technology types. And then on the left-hand side, different compliance requirements, including exhaust ventilation, safety caps, thermal runaway spill control, and explosion control. Prefabricated portable structure. The prefabricated portable buildings or contains shall be listed or approved with a 2-hour fire resistance rating. The structure shall be provided with a fire alarm system activated by an air aspirating smoke detector system or a radiant energy detection system. For outside storage location, outdoor storage locations for lithium metal or lithium ion batteries shall comply with the following. Individual pile sizes shall be limited to 900 square foot in area, separated by other piles by 10 foot. Piles located outdoors shall be separated by a minimum of 20 feet from the following exposures, including lot lines, public ways, buildings, other storage, hazardous materials, and other exposure hazards. Getting to the energy storage systems, ESS included but are not limited to the following categories. For chemical, there's hydrogen storage. For thermal, there's thermal energy storage. For electrochemical, there's batteries and flow batteries. For mechanical, there's flywheel, pumped hydro, and compressed air energy storage. And for electrical, there's capacitors and superconducting magnetic energy storage. For battery energy storage systems hazards, battery energy storage systems, or ESS, that are designed with sufficient safety protections and are installed, operated, and maintained in a manner that maintains the system's safety can be operated without incident, as evidenced by the systems currently operating safely in the field. The safety controls and hazard mitigation approaches needs to consider the inherent hazards associated with these systems, which can vary depending on the battery technology. The hazard concerns include fire and explosion hazards, chemical hazards, electrical hazards, stranded or stored energy hazards, and physical hazards. Getting into the commercially available battery technologies, for flow batteries you have, and I'm going to apologize currently for probably butchering some of these chemistries. So beginning with flow batteries, vanadium redox flow battery, zinc bromine flow battery, zinc air flow battery. And then for lead acid batteries, there's vented lead acid batteries, and then valve regulated lead acid batteries. For lithium ion batteries, there's lithium nickel cobalt aluminum oxide, there's lithium nickel magnesium cobalt oxide, there's lithium iron phosphate, and there's LTO. For lithium metal solid state batteries, there's nickel batteries, including nickel cadmium and nickel zinc batteries. There's nickel metal hydride batteries, there's sodium batteries, aqueous. There's high temperature batteries, including sodium batteries, high temperature. There's sodium sulfur batteries. There's sodium nickel chloride batteries. There's liquid metal batteries, and other technologies include electrochemical double layer capacitors. For firefighting considerations, emergency responder pre-incident plan should include understanding the procedures of the facility under normal and emergency operation, identifying the types of ESS technologies present and the associated hazards, identify the location of all electrical disconnects, understanding the procedures for shutting down and de-energizing or isolating equipment to reduce the risk of fire, electric shock, and personal injury hazards, understanding the procedures for dealing with damaged ESS equipment in a post-fire incident. Getting into the history of development codes under the ICC and NFPA, they've been in regulation since 1997 and have been updated every 3 years. They're updated. They're eligible for update every 3 years because that's the rotation in which they update. They don't update every year or every other year. It's on a 3-year rotation should they update. Getting into the decommissioning plan, the process and procedure of battery removal, reporting procedures, disposal plan, local and federal environmental regulations for battery disposal, safety data sheets, contact list of responsible parties involved in the execution of the plan, anticipated life of the BESS, estimated decommissioning cost, how said estimate was determined, method of ensuring funds for decommissioning and restoration, method by which the decommissioning cost will be kept current, and manner in which the BESS will be decommissioned and the site restored are all considered under the decommissioning plan. Guide for suppression and safety of lithium-ion battery energy storage systems. This is one of those appendices. The purpose of this annex is to help stakeholders, designers, and authorities having jurisdiction, AHJs, understand and implement minimum safety requirements through a permitting and inspection process to ensure efficiency, transparency, and safety in their local communities as an important first step in protecting public and first responder safety while promoting safe energy storage. The Tinoco Committee has developed this annex as a comprehensive set of guidelines for reviewing and evaluating LIB ESSS facilities. LIB stands for lithium-ion battery. This annex provides details about the design, hazard evaluation, installation, operation, appropriate technology application, inspection, and first responder safety processes for LIB-based ESS. So for Guide for Suppression Safety of Lithium-Ion Energy Storage Systems, the hazards that need to be addressed for ESS are fire and explosion hazards, chemical hazards, electrical hazards, stranded or stored energy hazards, and physical hazards. Beginning with fire and explosion hazards under abnormal, and there's normal and abnormal hazards. I only pulled out abnormal. Under abnormal conditions, fires can be a result of flammable concentrations due to overheating and venting of flammable gases. Short circuits and thermal runaway can cause overheating, and an oxidizer in an ESS will increase the intensity of a fire. For chemical hazards under abnormal conditions, hazards can be a result of corrosive spills, toxic liquid exposure, water reactive material exposure, and toxic gas exposure. Individuals working with, for electrical hazards, individuals working with ESS may come into contact with energized parts and could be impacted by electric shock or arc flash. Stranded or stored energy is the unquantified hazardous levels of electrical energy that can be contained in all or part of an ESS, including one that has been damaged or thought to be discharged and that represents a potential unquantified electrical hazard. Physical hazards include, under abnormal condition, hazards can be a result of overpressurization, hot parts, and exposed parts. Continuing on, and this is the potential impact radius. Explosion modeling has shown that the minimum distance should be 75 feet. It is recommended increasing that to a minimum clearance of 100 feet. For an evacuation area, recommended evacuating buildings within a 200-foot diameter of the battery energy storage system or BESS. There is potential for damage to glass and windows and structure depending on the distance from the site. Each hazard will be different based on the state of charge at the time of the event. So as a brief recap, you're getting into Indiana Code 2214A. It requires DHS approval. It must comply with NFPA 55, and it must include emergency response plan and include annual training for emergency response. NFPA includes items for emergency operations plan, hazard mitigation analysis, safety data sheets, and decommissioning, amongst many others. Then in review by the Technical Review Committee, there's some interest in the electromagnetic fields. Getting into electromagnetic field research, electromagnetic fields, electric and magnetic fields are invisible areas of energy, also called radiation, that are produced by electricity, which is the movement of electrons or current through a wire. An electric field is produced by voltage, which is the pressure used to push the electrons through the wire, much like water being pushed through a pipe. As the voltage increases, the electric field increases in strength. Electric fields are measured in volts per meter, or VM. Magnetic fields result from the flow of current through wires or electrical devices and increases in strength as currents increase. The strength of a magnetic field decreases rapidly with increasing distance from its source. Magnetic fields are measured in microteslas or millionths of a Tesla. Electromagnetic fields, electric and magnetic fields together are referred to as electromagnetic fields, or EMFs. The electric and magnetic forces in EMFs are caused by electromagnetic radiation. There are two main categories of EMFs. There's higher frequency EMF, which are ionizing radiation that can damage DNA or cells directly. And then there's low to mid frequency EMF, which is non-ionizing radiation, which are not known to damage DNA or cells directly. So what is the electromagnetic spectrum? Here's one diagram in relationship to showing the non-ionizing lower frequency on the left-hand side and the higher frequency ionizing on the right-hand side. You kind of work your way up through power lines, radio and television waves, cell phones, microwaves, to infrared devices, to visible light, and then you begin to transition into high frequency, which gets into ultraviolet radiation, X-rays, and radioactive waste. Here's another diagram to kind of show it in relationship to non-ionizing on the left-hand side and ionizing on the right-hand side, and kind of working your way from the low end to the high end, you've got power lines that run 50 to 60 hertz, computers that are 60 to 100. Then you get into radio and broadcasting equipment, mobile phones, smart meters, Wi-Fi, remote controls, and microwaves. Then you step into the visible light spectrum, and then you get into the ionizing radiation, which gets into diagnostic radiation and therapeutic radiation. In 1999, at the conclusion of the EMF RAPID program, the NIEHS reported to the United States Congress that the overall scientific evidence for human health risk for EMF exposure is weak. No consistent pattern of biological effects from exposure to EMF had emerged from laboratory studies with animals or with cells. However, epidemiological studies of disease incidence in human populations had shown a fairly consistent pattern that associated potential EMF exposure with a small increased risk for leukemia in children and chronically lymphomatic leukemia in adults. EMF exposures are complex and exist in the home and workplace as a result of all types of electrical equipment and building wiring, as well as a result of nearby power lines. How are power frequency EMF different from other types of electromagnetic energy? X-rays, visible light, microwaves, radio waves, and EMF are all forms of electromagnetic energy. One property that distinguishes different forms of electromagnetic energy is the frequency expressed in hertz, or Hz. Power frequency EMF is 50 or 60 hertz, carries very little energy and has no ionizing effects and usually has no thermal effects. Some types of equipment or operations simultaneously produce electromagnetic energy or different frequencies. Welding operations, for example, can produce electromagnetic energy in the ultraviolet, visible, infrared, and radio frequency ranges, in addition to power frequency EMF. Microwave ovens produce 60 hertz fields of several hundred milligases, but they also create microwave energy inside the oven that is a much higher frequency of about 2.45 billion hertz. We are shielded from the higher frequency fields inside the oven, but it's causing an oven by its casing. But we are not shielded from the 60 hertz fields. Cellular telephones communicate by emitting high-frequency electricity and magnetic fields similar to those used for radio and television broadcasts. These radio frequency and microwave fields are quite different from the extremely low-frequency EMF produced by power lines and most appliances. How are alternating current sources of EMF different from different direct current sources? Some equipment can run on either alternating current or direct current, AC or DC. In most parts of the United States, if the equipment is plugged into a household wall socket, it is using AC electric current that reverses direction in the electrical wiring or alternates 60 times per second or at 60 hertz. If the equipment uses batteries, then electric current flows in one direction only. This produces a static or stationary magnetic field, also called a direct current field. Some battery-operated equipment can produce time-varying magnetic fields as part of its normal operation. How do we evaluate whether EMF exposures cause health effects? Animal experiments, laboratory studies of cells, clinical studies, computer simulations, and human population epidemiological studies all provide valuable information. When evaluating evidence that certain exposures cause diseases, scientists consider results from studies in various disciplines. No single study or type of study is definitive. What levels of EMF are found in common environments? So this is one of the charts provided in the portion, and it goes through the different environments, including office buildings, schools, hospitals, machine shops, and grocery stores, showing the median exposure and those that are in the top 5th percentile. The median exposure ranges anything from about 0.5 to upwards of 2.7 as a cashier at a grocery store. Electromagnetic fields for power transmission lines in relationship to 115 kV, 230 kV, and 500 kV lines. Directly underneath, you're looking at one electric field or kilovolt per meter, or a 29.7 main magnetic field underneath a 115 kV line. You move out to 50 foot, the approximate edge of the right-of-way for that type of line, you drop to 0.5 and 6.5 respectively for electric and magnetic. You move 100 feet away, it goes to 0.7 or 0.07 and 1.7 respectively. Going out to 200 feet, it goes to 0.01 and 0.4. And then it continues on, and those numbers increase the higher you go in terms of 230 kV and 500 kV. So if you kind of compare the transmission levels on the right-hand side with the two charts that were also found in that study, the International Commission of Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection has the upper guidelines, and the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists has the bottom one, where occupational has a guideline for exposure at 60 hertz for an electric field at 8.3 and general public at 4.2, and the magnetic field at 4.2 gases and 0.833 gases for general public. And then ACGIH, similar, gets into the occupational hazard. Prudence dictates the use of protective clothing, and then exposure of workers with cardiac pacemakers should not exceed some additional considerations. Getting into electromagnetic fields, the NIEHS report to Congress at conclusion of the EMF RAPID program had the following excerpts. The NIEHS believes that the probability that EMF exposure is truly a health hazard is currently small. The weak epidemiological associations and lack of any laboratory support for these associations provide only marginal scientific support that exposure to this agent is causing any degree of harm. The scientific evidence suggesting that extremely low frequency EMF exposures pose any health risk is weak. The strongest evidence for health effects comes from associations observed in human populations with two forms of cancer, childhood leukemia and chronic lymphomatic leukemia in occupationally exposed adults. While the support from individual studies is weak, the epidemiological studies demonstrate from some methods of measuring exposure a fairly consistent pattern of a small increased risk with increasing exposure that is somewhat weaker for chronic lymphomatic leukemia than for childhood leukemia. In contrast, the mechanistic studies and the animal toxicology literature failed to demonstrate any consistent pattern across studies, although sporadic findings of biological effects, including increased cancers in animals, have been reported. No indication of increased leukemias in experimental animals has been observed. Now, getting into the proposal for the ordinance itself. An ordinance amending Article 3, 6, and 13 to create a regulation for battery energy storage systems. In short, and we'll get into all of these items in a second, it covers the ordinance proposal under Article 3 for uses in districts, and then under Article 6, which is where the development standards take place, includes the intent, public purpose, types of battery energy storage systems, the personal battery energy storage systems, and utility battery energy storage systems, and their associated requirements, getting into permitting, site planning, decommissioning, bonding, and then Article 13 gets into definitions. So without further ado, if you want to follow along in your packet, we'll begin on page 1, and then I will lose track of what page we are on, but it will go section by section as we go through. So beginning with Article 3, for Section 010, the A1 Agricultural District, we're proposing to put it under the Transportation, Communication, and Utility section as a special use. Then getting into Section 090, the I1 Industrial District, again, putting it under the Transportation, Communication, and Utilities as a permitted use. Under Section 100, I2 Heavy Industrial District, again, under Transportation, Communications, and Utilities section, we're proposing to put it as a permitted use. And then Section 120 is the Land Use Matrix, so to make everything above all English and easy to read. The Transportation, Communication, and Utilities subsection would then include a utility battery energy storage system component to it, where it shows A1 as a special use. All other districts until you get to the industrial category would not be permitted, and then the industrial categories or districts would be a permitted use. Getting into Article 6, Section 250 would be a new section created, and the intent would be written in to identify that in order to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare of the community while accommodating the energy needs of residents and businesses, these regulations are necessary in order to, 1, to bring the benefits of reliable energy to Marshall County, including the potential to add local jobs, reduce energy bills, and reduce pollution in a manner that preserves reliability and affordability. 2, minimize adverse effects of battery energy storage systems through careful design and siting standards. 3, avoid potential damage to adjacent properties from battery energy storage system failure through structural standards and setback requirements. 4, a battery energy storage system is considered a primary use if there is no other primary use on site. Continuing on, under item B, the public purpose regulations of the siting of BEST facilities is an exercise of the valid police power delegated by the state of Indiana. The developer has the duty of compliance with reasonable conditions laid down by the Marshall County Planning Commission. Item C, the types of battery energy storage systems. There are 2 proposed types. Type A is the personal battery energy storage system, a battery energy storage system for the use of a residential dwelling or associated accessory building within or outside of the structure. For B is the utility battery energy storage system, a battery energy storage system for commercial or utility use. Under Section D, personal battery energy storage system standards will be treated similar to heating, air conditioning, and ventilation and standby generators and shall require permit and associated inspections. For utility battery energy storage system standards, setbacks are proposed at property line setbacks of 100 feet. The interior project property line setback is based on the base zoning district standard. For C, the residential dwelling setback for battery units is 250 feet. For non-residential structure setback for battery units is 200 feet. For the Number 2, buffer shall provide an adequate visual 4-season screen while within 250 feet of the residence and where required by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Buffering shall be maintained, including but not limited to trimming if necessary, removal of dead or fallen trees, and replanting for the life of the project. Buffering shall be considered when adjacent non-residential parcels may have competing uses. For fencing, the appropriate fencing shall be installed in accordance with associated electrical code and other governing codes. The security fence shall be kept and repaired, painted, and maintained in good condition. For power and communication lines running between battery units and associated infrastructure to nearby electric substations or interconnections buildings shall be buried underground. Exemptions may be granted by Marshall County in instances where shallow bedrock, watercourses, or other elements of natural landscape interfere with the ability to bury lines. Distance makes undergrounding infeasible or best practice at the discretion of the plan director. For deforestation shall be minimized and approved by the plan director and the Board of Zoning Appeals. For topsoil preservation, topsoil shall be preserved on-site and grading should be minimized to preserve the future viability of plantings, and the natural contours of the property must be maintained. For signage, the BEST shall have signage in compliance with ANSI requirement and or applicable federal, state, or local standards. Some of the information should include the facility name, address, and emergency contact information. For lighting, the lighting of the battery energy storage system shall be limited to the minimally required for safety and security purposes only. The lighting design should incorporate lighting that is motion sensor controlled, fully shielded, and downward casting, and use of floodlights is discouraged. For noise, the developer and/or operator must account for sound level unless otherwise allowed under 36741109 as amended. The developer must provide information pertaining and showcasing the sound attributed by the energy storage system, and all associated components will not exceed an hourly average sound level of 50 A-weighted decibels as modeled at the outer wall of a dwelling located on an adjacent non-participating property. This requirement may be waived by the written consent of the owner of each adjacent non-participating property. The developer and/or operator shall ensure that the facility is properly grounded and maintained to prevent straight voltage and include a preliminary grounding site plan in the special use application and final grounding site plan in the submitted construction drawings for building permit approval. Force majeure, should a force majeure event such as fire, flood, tornado, or other natural disaster, acts of God, war, civil strife, a terrorist attack, or other similar acts of violence, other unforeseen events or events over which a project owner has no control results in the best not managing electricity, the owner and operator shall, as soon as practicable after the force majeure event, provide notice to the permit authority of the event and of the resulting cessation of generating operation. Also must demonstrate to the permit authority that the BEST will be substantially operation and managing electricity not later than 12 months after the occurrence of the force majeure event. If the BEST does not become substantially operational and resume managing electricity within 12 months, the project will be considered abandoned and the decommissioning plan will take effect. For access roads, all access roads should be at least 12 foot wide, constructed of an all-weather surface, and have sufficient horizontal and vertical space for large vehicles, including but not limited to fire department apparatus. Access roads must include turnarounds and may require locations for passing or overtake. For batteries, the failed battery cells and modules shall not be stored on site and shall be removed no later than 30 days after deemed failed by the BEST operator or cell module manufacturer. Getting into number 14, must be reviewed by the Technical Review Committee. Getting to item F, which will include a site plan, a state-approved permit as required under Indiana Code 2214-8, along with approved and provided submitted materials, the identification of the type of battery system, the safety data sheets for the specific units, the emergency response plan, and that shall be provided and shall provide a copy of the emergency response plan that addresses the requirements set forth in NFPA 855 for permitting. Again, in number 6, the hazard mitigation analysis or letter of non-applicability. The applicant shall provide a letter summarizing the hazard mitigation analysis or HMA, or similar letter detailing how an HMA is not applicable / warranted under NFPA 855. The property operations and maintenance plan, a environmental report, and that of applicant shall submit an environmental report at the cost of the developer to include the following areas of interest, including the water and soil testing locations shall be submitted and approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals to have results submitted to the Marshall County Commissioners. Testing by a qualified third party is required to ensure that there are not any adverse impacts to soil and water resources. Other areas to be covered within the environmental report include compaction, testing and location, soil erosion plan, and weed management. Under number 8, traffic management plan, the applicant shall have a traffic management plan approved by the Marshall County Highway Superintendent / Marshall County Commissioners. The commissioning plan shall be in accordance with NFPA 855, a decommissioning plan, and a restoration and reclamation plan. Getting into the site plan specifically itself, the required maps and drawings should include the below items on one or more pages: the property lines, including roads and rights-of-way, distance to FEMA floodplain as designated by the latest firm or DNR best available floodplain maps, vegetation, buffer, and landscaping plan, setbacks, and existing conditions and proposed improvements. Then getting into the decommissioning, restoration, and reclamation requirements. A decommissioning plan, prior to the issuance of a building permit, a decommissioning plan must be approved by the county commissioners and recorded with the Marshall County Recorder, cross-reference to the deed or deeds to all associated project parcels. The decommissioning plan shall at minimum meet NFPA 855 requirements. And then restoration and reclamation plan, the restoration and reclamation plan shall include how the site improvements will be removed and the site will be brought back into the pre-construction surface grade and soil profile after removal of the structures, equipment, graveled areas, and access roads. It will also include how the revegetation of restored soil areas with crops, native seed mixes, and plant species suitable to the area. Getting into bonding, bond or financial assurance that will cover the reconstruction of public infrastructure due to construction activity related to the battery energy storage system installation that would be approved in association with the traffic management plan. Bond or financial assurance that will cover the decommissioning of the battery energy storage system as described in the decommissioning plan. Bonds and financial assurances shall be reevaluated every 3 years with contributions adjusting at the time to cover cost of decommissioning. At the cost of the developer / project owner, a revised cost report shall be submitted and approved by the county commissioners. Upon reevaluation, and said report will include the adjusted decommissioning costs and salvage values. The amount of the bonds or financial assurances must be approved by the Marshall County commissioners, and then the bond amounts must be agreed to at the time of decommissioning plan approval by county commissioners, and bonds shall be in place prior to building permit approval. And then finally getting into the definitions section. under Section 010. ANSI is the American National Standard Institute. Battery or batteries is a single or group of cells connected together electrically in series, in parallel, or a combination of both, which can charge, discharge, and store energy. For the purpose of this definition, batteries utilized in consumer products are excluded. Battery energy storage management system, an electronic system that protects batteries from operating outside of their safe operating parameters and generates an alarm and trouble signal for off normal conditions. And then getting into battery energy storage systems, or BESS, is a rechargeable energy storage system consisting of batteries, battery chargers, controls, power conditioning systems, and associated electrical equipment. The system is typically used to provide standby or emergency power and uninterruptible power supply, load shedding, load sharing, smoothing, and dispatching of intermittent renewable energy sources or similar capabilities. kWh is the abbreviation for kilowatt hour, which is a measure of energy capacity of a battery and a battery energy storage system. NEC is the National Electric Code, and NFPA is the National Fire Protection Association. So for the procedure, this is a recommendation to the county commissioners. This is a recommendation, it is advisory only, and is not binding on the county commissioners. For the analysis, currently with the Marshall County zoning ordinance, there are little to no requirements for battery energy storage systems. The Planning Commission has advised the county commissioners, and there is currently a moratorium in place prohibiting the application of battery energy storage systems that is set to expire on October 16th, 2024. The moratorium is set so that the Planning Commission can consider and determine appropriate building, zoning, and use regulations which should be adopted and incorporated into the Marshall County zoning ordinance as the same pertain to utility-scale battery energy storage systems. Battery energy storage systems are the latest in a line of ordinances that the public has taken great interest in. The county ordinance currently only has a one-line reference under the existing solar ordinance as of early February 2024, but as battery technology has advanced and become a more viable standalone land use, an ordinance is in need of being created should a project apply in Marshall County's zoning jurisdiction. The state of Indiana has adopted a process, procedure, and series of requirements that are to be adhered to for battery energy storage systems effective July 2023. Those requirements were reviewed along with a reference document NFPA 55, which set the standard for battery energy storage systems. The following proposal is based on the research of Indiana Code 22-14-8 under HEA 1173. Titled the Utility Scale Battery Energy Storage Systems, then looking into the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA 855, the standard for the installation of stationary energy storage systems, articles by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, UL Solutions, previously Underwriters Laboratories, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, the American Clean Power, along with multiple communities with existing battery storage ordinances outside of the state of Indiana due to the recent interest in the state of Indiana for such projects and the lack of ordinances dedicated to regulating them. One of the amendment per discussions with the local fire department has been included and can be shown in the track changes document. As better detailed in the PowerPoint presentation for the research from Indiana Code 22-14-8, various sources and communities, grid scale, battery storage FAQ, UL 9540, citing and best safety best practices for battery energy storage systems, energy storage and local zoning ordinances, and an overview of local zoning ordinances for battery energy storage systems, community codes, and NFPA 55. Below is some basic information from the analysis prior to writing the ordinance. Indiana Code now requires that the Department of Homeland Security regulate and approve all BESS projects beginning July 1st, 2023, and shall be compliant with NFPA 855. It permits BESS projects within 1/2 mile of a floodplain so long as the structure is raised 2 foot above floodplain, commonly known as flood protection grade. The operator shall provide a copy of the emergency response plan and provide annual training for the fire department on their specific operation. Per the article citing and safety best practices for battery energy storage systems by Exeter Associates, there are 3 items that should be updated in current regulations of battery facilities, and they fall into 3 categories, including siting, safety, and decommissioning. They were more detailed as the siting plan should address undergrounding on site utility lines, maintaining the site free of vegetation and following noise, height, and setback requirements, fencing or enclosing the site, and installing screening or other measures to minimize visibility impacts. The safety plan should include hazard detection systems, means of protecting incipient fires, and ventilation and cooling strategies for protecting against thermal runaway fires and explosions. As a corollary, sound training must be provided to local responders so that they are equipped to handle any of these potential emergencies, which require substantially different tactics, as safely as possible. BEST should have plans to address extreme weather, earthquakes, and other environmental threats that may occur. The decommissioning plan should include descriptions of the steps that will be taken, a cost estimate, a funding plan, and a contingency plan for handling damaged batteries. The 4 communities that were reviewed in 3 states had the following standards of interest: tiers of battery storage, reference to state building code and NFPA 855, road access, clearance space, lighting for safety and security, and shall be shielded 30 feet, clearance space vegetation in accordance with 855, setbacks, buffer, fencing, noise, decommissioning plan, and bond, safety data sheets or SDS, emergency operations plan, statement of purpose, applicability, general requirements, and utility lines. NFPA 855 is comprised of 15 chapters and 8 annexes that have been around and amended every 3 years since the mid to late 1990s. It covers topics including but not limited to definitions, hazard mitigation analysis, system interconnections, commissioning, operation and maintenance, firefighting considerations, decommissioning, and has a specific annex titled Guide for Suppression and Safety of Lithium-Ion Battery Energy Storage Systems, which is beneficial because lithium-ion is the leading and most used technology when it comes to energy storage systems. The annex indicates that as an important first step in protecting public and first responder safety while promoting safe energy storage, the technical committee has developed this annex as a comprehensive set of guidelines for reviewing and evaluating LIB ESS facilities, as well as the annex provides details about the design, hazard evaluation, installation, operations, and appropriate technology application, inspection, and first responder safety processes for LIB-based ESS. The annex even goes on towards the end to indicate that through explosion modeling has shown that the minimum distance should be at 75 feet and has recommended increasing that to a minimum of 100 feet. Then that a recommended evacuating buildings within a 200-foot diameter of the battery energy storage system or BEST. There's potential for damage to glass and windows structure depending on distance from the site. Each hazard will be different based on the stage or the state of charge at the time of the event. The Technical Review Committee met on Thursday, February 1st, and outside of its recommendation discussed later, indicated that some of the additional research would be beneficial on electromagnetic fields and sound frequency. Below is a brief synopsis for the analysis, but additional information is provided within the PowerPoint presentation. Included within the EMF and sound frequency research were articles from the National Cancer Institute and National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. NCI indicates that electric and magnetic fields are invisible areas of energy, also called radiation, that are produced by electricity, which is the movement of electrons or current through a wire. Electric and magnetic fields are referred to as EMF, and there are 2 categories: high frequency ionizing and low to mid frequency non-ionizing. High frequency is a greater frequency than visible light, beginning at approximately 10 to the 15th power hertz, the measurability of frequency. Low frequency is less than the visible light spectrum from 0 to approximately 10 to the 15th power of hertz. As a point of reference, power frequency is 50 to 60 hertz. Cell phone operates at approximately 1,000 hertz or 10 to the 3rd power per the NIEHS study. Per the NIEHS study, one of the topics included links to EMF to childhood leukemia, but the association is weak and it is not clear whether it represents a cause and effect relationship. The study further goes on to discuss relationships between EMF and heart rate, sleep, electrophysiology, melatonin, and several more topics. These items were researched post the recommendation of the proposal, and should the Planning Commission identify a need for change in the ordinance as proposed, it can be reverted back to staff and/or the Technical Review Committee for additional consideration for a user-friendly version of reading the ordinance, see attached and/or the associated PowerPoint based on the information provided. So for recommendation, based on the information provided to the Technical Review Committee, there was a majority recommendation to approve the proposal with the inclusion of the fire department's access amendments, but there were some areas of interest, including the term third party who had rights to select whom the third party would be, corresponding with the local emergency management director, setbacks being too small, and the effects of EMF and sound frequency. Per meeting with the Plan Commission attorney, there are a few sections that can be benefit from additional clarity, but the suggested amendments were not included as the meeting was after the ordinance was initially proposed. So now it's up for the Plan Commission recommendation, with the recommendation coming from the TRC based on the information provided to the TRC. Based on the information provided to the TRC, the Technical Review Committee, there was a majority recommendation to approve the proposal with the inclusion of the fire department access amendments. There were some areas of interest, including the term third party and who had rights to select whom for the third party would be, the corresponding with the local emergency management director, setbacks being too small, and effects of EMF and sound frequency. And then per the meeting with the Plan Commission attorney, there are a few sections that could benefit from additional clarity, but the suggested amendments were not included as the meeting was after the ordinance was initially proposed. So staff would recommend that the Plan Commission continue with the public hearing, and rather than take action on sending it to the county commissioners, that the best course of action is to either take the evening's information under advisement to digest information presented and comments made by the public, and then provide guidance to staff at a future meeting determined by the commissioning tonight, or to provide guidance to staff on additional items of interest in the development of a best ordinance, and to bring back amendments and presentation and present the additional research at a later meeting determined by the commissioning tonight. That is all I have currently.
Wow.
Do you need a break?
I would like to.
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate. I'm sorry for the people, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute. Is that enough? We're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 20 minutes till 9, please. Ty, I assume our next step, unless you guys have some specific questions for Ty, would be to open up the public hearing? Correct? I assume there are several people in my audience here that is interested in speaking tonight. Could I see a show of hands? Okay, obviously there's quite a few. We're going to set the same parameters that I have in other large meetings of this type of atmosphere. 3 minutes. We'll give you 3 minutes to talk. I'll not interrupt you in the middle of a comment, but we want you to end it, because Ty usually does a nice job of telling us, hey, your 3 minutes are up, or gives you a warning. So please be prepared to end. If I think you're carrying on too long, or you're repeating something you've already stated before, or somebody else has already stated, I may cut you even shorter. So, all those, I think we just do this, do we do favor or opposed? Yeah, I think
We
that's
have a motion, I make a motion to open public
public
hearing.
hearing, yep.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to open public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, public hearing, do the wrap, is now open. We'll start, obviously, as we always do, favor and opposed, or comments. I assume we'll have all kinds of comments. So who would like to speak first? I'll word it that way. All right, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Casey Neidlinger, 16682 14B Road, Culver.
You are going to have to speak up a little bit, so I heard you, but I was giving you a
Okay.
little warning there.
So we just looked at a lot of research, and it's a lot to digest, but one fact stuck out to me. It's the fire risk. 14 fires on 461 installations, if I recall, for about a 3% risk rate. But the part that I think it goes unsaid is that has to be compounded every single year. So 3% risk for year one, 2% for year two, 9% for year three. You get the point. It adds up. The other thing, too, that I think that goes unmentioned, too, is the fact that any good risk manager has to take into account the severity of the risk. So risk is a composite of severity and likelihood. Given the severity of contaminating our groundwater or soil, if there is a fire, do you really think it's worth the benefits we saw on one of the slides that argues why this is a good idea for Marshall County? I'm just asking a question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We're not going to answer questions like that. But I appreciate your comment.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Anybody else want to speak?
I'll speak.
Come on up, please.
Okay.
Even though we obviously know you, but please go ahead and state your name and address.
Debbie Vandemark, 14750 Tulip Road, Culver. I have a packet I'd like to hand out. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
So, as you know, I've had quite an interest in these projects, as the proposed project that's already been recorded is about a half mile from my house. And I just found out that on January 11th, another recording has been made for battery storage, I assume, because it's Oriole Entity Storage, which is kind of tied to the other one. So, in this packet, I sat down with my neighbors who live across from the proposed project, and we came up with some suggestions to the proposed ordinance. And when you open up the packet, You'll find our recommendations here. Now, after the presentation today, I thought of a few more. And Ed Allen and Joe Allen and I sat down for several hours and worked on these packets to present to you. One of them was to remove, in Article 3, remove from agricultural districts and add to commercial districts or industrial districts. Article 6, intent, eliminate while accommodating the energy needs of residents and businesses. Eliminate to bring the benefits of reliable energy to Marshall County, including the potential to add local jobs. We don't see it adding many local jobs. Or reducing energy bills is not guaranteed. And it's not going to reduce or eliminate pollution and negative impact to our environment. We don't know any of those things are going to happen. Add utility battery storage systems shall not be permitted for lithium-ion type batteries. Number 4, change at the discretion of the plan director to approve by the Board of Zoning Appeals. E8, eliminate use of floodlights is discouraged. If it's discouraged, don't put it in there. I mean, we shouldn't use them. Permitting needs to include, and then we put types of buildings to be constructed, provide adequate cooling systems for summer operations, connect electrical apparatuses installed in separate enclosures or in close proximity to batteries. And then on page 2, recommended proposals and changes to proposed battery energy storage systems. Battery area to be adequately ventilated to remove any potential explosive gases generated from charging cycles. Buildings protected by fire and smoke detection system. I think that was kind of in the presentation. Systems must provide remote alert and communication to offset personnel and fire. Procedures for frequency of battery maintenance and testing. Setbacks, property line setbacks 500, residential dwelling setbacks 1,500, railway right-of-way setbacks 1,500. We're kind of concerned with that railway there. And I don't know if anybody's talked to the rails, but I don't know if batteries really should be close to railroads. I'm a little concerned about that. One thing that I thought about tonight as the presentation was going on, I didn't see any liability insurance to protect neighbors if there is an incident. Is there, any thought about maybe putting something in there if we have to evacuate? The other site that was leased is right in Burr Oak, so I'm concerned about that as well. And I guess my time's up. I have more, but I could.
Thank you very much. I do
Finished.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Deb.
I think it might help us, because I've seen the commissioners do this. If you're wanting to speak, if you could line up along the side wall so we try to shorten up the time in between each speaker so we're not here to the wee hours, if that's okay. Please state your name and address, please.
Steve Barry, 11239 Manor Drive, Plymouth.
Thank you.
And I'm here representing Marshall County Farm Bureau tonight. We have over 2,500 members in the county, and we are in full support of the county council recommendation for a 2-year moratorium on the industrial solar and battery storage. So I want to go on record saying that. And reviewing the info presented tonight, I can see at least 11 issues that are not adequately addressed. And I'd be glad to present them at additional time so I can comply with my 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Steve Gorski, 805 Baker Street, Plymouth. While the meeting was going on, I took some noise dosimeter readings just to give everybody a reference. Averaged 50 decibels in the room while Mr. Adley was speaking. A noise level that would probably be inheritant to all of us in the summer if our windows were open at 500 or 1,000 feet away from these units. Where in the presentation it said the average noise was going to be, I think it was up close, but it would be 50 to 80 decibels.
At the unit.
So something to consider, if you would please. And the other question is there any state code statute that would prevent a total ban of battery energy storage systems?
I don't have an answer to that, so I'm
I
sorry.
didn't think so, Based on the presentation, I'm going to guess that it's going to be tabled to allow for more time for Mr. Adley's presentation, to allow more time to gather more information, but something else to consider at that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
James Hingston, Long Beach, California. Sorry, can
Sure, move it wherever you need.
there we go. My name is James Hingston. I'm the lead developer at Tenaska, working on our Oriole energy storage project here in Marshall County. Over the past several months, we have introduced our project to county leaders and met with first responders and community members to answer questions about our plans. We appreciate the hard work the county staff has dedicated to drafting the ordinance, but there are 3 items in the ordinance that we feel should be revised. First, we think the setbacks in the proposed ordinance are excessive. They are more restrictive than the recommendations of NFPA 855. We think the county should consider adjusting setbacks from residential structures to 200 feet and from property lines to 50 feet to more closely align the ordinance with the NFPA code that is in the state law. We do not believe that a separate setback for non-residential structures is necessary, as those structures would be protected by property line setbacks. We also suggest that there be an avenue to waive setbacks if an agreement is reached between participating and non-participating landowners. The proposed setbacks could remove up to 30% of buildable land of a typical battery storage project, because a typical battery storage project is developed on only 10 to 20 acres, which is approximately 100 times smaller than a comparable solar energy project taking up thousands of acres. Excessive setbacks won't provide further protection. They'll instead incentivize larger projects than what is truly needed. Second, the ordinance should include a waiver for interior property line setbacks. If any property owners are willingly developing their own land, mandating a setback between their own internal property lines is logical. Those with control over multiple parcels should have the flexibility to construct across these internal lines. Decommissioning plans are required of any energy storage facilities and will guarantee that the land is restored to its original condition post-project. And third, the ordinance says that every 3 years, bonds and financial assurances should be reevaluated and adjusted. The ordinance goes further, though, and requires that these updates be submitted to the county commissioners every 3 years for approval. Rather than having discretionary approvals required every 3 years, we suggest the updates and reevaluations be conducted by an agreed-upon third party to ensure their accuracy. We thank the Planning Department and the Planning Commission for their work on the ordinance. We look forward to continuing to work with you on our storage project that will improve the local electric grid and bring new investment to Marshall County. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. Tom Benson, 8350 US Highway 23 North, Delaware, Ohio. I'm a founding principal of Energy Safety Response Group, often referred to as ESRG. My background includes fire investigations, full-scale, medium-scale fire testing in research of lithium-ion batteries, battery systems. I'm a committee member, founding committee member of NFPA 855. And also involved in fire department and law enforcement. I've also been involved with the Indiana Department of Homeland Security on meetings when they were developing the regulations on energy storage. Tenaska has engaged ESRG to meet and exceed the compliance of NFPA 855, the Indiana regulation, and other codes and standards. So our engagement with Tenaska will involve public safety training, emergency response plans that will be site-specific, hazard mitigation analysis, and other public safety training and consulting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. John Grolick, Franklin Street, Plymouth. More importantly, President of the County Fire Association. Late August, early September, Fire Chief Terry Wakefield, Fire Chief Steve Hollum, and myself met with the folks from Tenaska just to become familiar with their project and kind of fill them out and see what they would offer as far as education and maybe some benefits to the fire service. We were kind of mean to them, really. But more importantly, we were concerned about safety. Safety was really our primary goal, as Mr. Wakefield serves the Culver community. And I think the primary proposal for these battery storage facilities are in his response area. They seem to meet his concerns. They agreed to put in 2 to 3 10 to 12-inch wells at the sites if that's what was required by the fire service. Part of NFPA 855 is requirement of a minimum of 30,000 gallons of water to supply in the event there's a thermal runaway at any of these facilities. So I think from the fire service perspective, they at least met our concerns, and they most definitely are eager to provide education to the first responders in those response areas where they're proposed. So with that, certainly we will address any questions that anybody may have, but the fire service has at least satisfied with the commitment that they have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greg Hildebrand with Marshall County Economic Development Corporation. I'm not going to speak about any one particular project as it hasn't been permitted yet, and I don't have numbers to share with you about how it would particularly benefit the county, but I can speak in general terms about why battery energy storage systems are important. They're an important part of the electrical infrastructure as the market demands higher amounts of clean, renewable energy. Investors and consumers are both paying more attention to the carbon emissions of the organizations they invest in and the products they produce. For example, the majority of requests for information that we receive at Marshall County Economic Development Corporation ask electric providers generation mix, or they will ask us to describe the ability for the site to be served with renewable or low to no carbon energy sources. This is a quote directly from the 2023 NiSource ESG report, page 2, the highlights. I have it there if you want to look at it. They are on track to retire 100% of coal assets by 2028 and replace them primarily with renewables. This transition didn't start the last 3 years. This has been a transition that's been happening in the market for more than a decade. Marshall County has several large employers that are foreign-based entities. The European Union-based companies are facing the looming 2025 Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. This includes their upstream and downstream carbon emissions, both domestically and foreign. They will need to report what their carbon footprint is. So those entities that are here in the States, they're requiring low or no carbon energy. It goes into, they're being required of that. Why should we allow this BESS in Marshall County? BESS, renewable energy generation, digital technology, and all large capital investments. The buildings and infrastructure to house them, the personal property equipment they utilize are investments in Marshall County that can have real positive effects on the net assessed valuation and the property tax rates of the citizens of this county. This type of development will employ highly paid skilled workers full-time and employ large numbers of tradespeople during construction, large periods of construction. I've spoken about direct, indirect, and induced impact on the number of jobs created by a project. All these come into effect. All these jobs bring real economic impact to the local and regional economy. In conclusion, much-needed infrastructure upgrade to help satisfy higher and greener energy demands. Great capital investment in the county, reducing tax rates for property owners, and job creation and economic activity which benefits all residents of the region. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Connie Neininger. I live in White County and work for the Center for Infrastructure and Economic Development, a national organization that supports county officials in education of renewables. The Technical Review Committee and Ty has done a great job of research, and county officials are being asked to approve battery energy storage systems in many communities. As such, the center has deemed it prudent to increase our awareness of current Battery Energy Storage Systems Ordinance, say that 3 times real fast, and industry standards, whether they be standalone projects or accessory use on existing solar and wind projects. While BESS are somewhat new, energy storage in communities is not new and is already addressed in many of your ordinances. Gas stations have underground storage tanks that often have the BTU equivalent of most battery systems, along with grain elevators, fertilizer storage, bulk storage of petroleum products, liquefied petroleum gas, propane, and ammonia. Your existing standards can provide some guidance and inform land use treatment of battery systems regarding how to mitigate, including use standards, setbacks, and integrated code safety standards. Safety is a concern for communities when crafting batteries ordinances, especially related to potential fire hazards. Batteries themselves have no flammable organic material. During malfunctions, batteries get really hot. So fire suppression is there to mitigate heat starting something else on fire. According to the Electric Power Research Institute, since 2012, there have been 22 battery fires nationwide. In 2023, there were 7 battery fires across the country, while the average number of grain silos that blow up every year is 7.8. Extreme weather conditions are sometimes questioned. Battery systems are made to operate in extreme cold and extreme heat in order to support the electrical grid system. According to the American Planning Association, best practices for battery energy storage systems include, they should be allowed across land use transects, because battery storage has value everywhere the grid is located and energy is produced. So they could be installed at sites generating power, typically solar and wind production, within its own structure or as a standalone. And when you're looking at thresholds, consider that these standalone projects may only be 10 or 20 acres. So your setbacks should take that into consideration as far as difference from a 1,000-acre project. Ordinances should comply with NFPA 855 as is stated. And there are some other things that we will send a written letter to you in comment that we will now review your ordinance in whole and provide some feedback and offer our services to help in any way possible. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Janelle Prothno-Naylor, 16541 Robert Court, Plymouth, Indiana, 46563. A fire in April 2022 involving one containerized unit at Chandler, Arizona, burnt for over 10 days. To keep the temperature down, an automatic sprinkler system was left running the entire time. A robot was eventually used to open the doors of the container, which kept the responders at a safe distance in case of an explosion. At least 3 of the fire incidents over the last 12 months have involved lithium iron phosphate. batteries, a type that some references had previously stated were inherently safe, or at least safer, from cascading thermal runaways. While they might be safer, LPF batteries are still subject to these runaway conditions. And like lithium-ion batteries, they typically contain ethylene carbonate electrolyte, which can generate flammable gases. If the battery undergoes thermal runaway, an example of an incident involving an LFP BESS is shown in Figure 5, which is in your packet. And one more thing, we're all just wondering, I guess my question is, where does this proposed ordinance and information come from? Does it come from the energy companies? How are we gathering our ordinances? I mean, where do they come from? Is it energy companies? Is it?
Ty's gathering
I mean,
our information.
how did we come up with all of this? That's, I guess, the information that you get.
Yeah.
I mean, did you
He's
brainstorm?
not, he's not
and
here
you
to
did all
answer
this
those
all by
specific,
yourself?
excuse me. You gotta talk to us.
You pointed at him, so I looked
I
at
know,
him.
I just wanted, I was trying to answer that one
I thought you
question,
said, hey,
but,
look that way.
but no, I meant, he's gathering the information for us. I admit, we're not doing this. He's
Okay.
gathering it for us to review, for you to
Right.
be able to review.
We just want to know, where can we go? If he's getting his information, then, maybe we can look too, to say, hey, let's get another,
And I don't, obviously, I don't have a problem with you doing that, but what I think you need to do is contact
Ask
him
him.
during the business hours, and I'm sure he'll share what he can with you.
Okay. That's all we're wondering.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your
All right,
comments.
thank you.
Looks like that concludes our comments.
What about letters?
Oh, do we have letters?
I do have letters.
Thank you. Appreciate the reminder.
First letter reads, please read this to the Planning Commission at tomorrow's meeting. Mike and I are very concerned with the push your department is making to hurry the decisions to be made over a very new, complicated source of energy, solar power. I ask the commission to use all the time it will take to study this source of energy as it affects our farmland in the next decades. There should be no hurry in your research into this very important decision. Thank you for your considerations of our views.
You're done.
Let me finish. Thank you for your consideration of our views. Patty Stallings, 506 East Lake Shore Drive, Culver, Indiana. And then she's included her email and cell phone number. It can be obtained should you desire.
Thank you.
The next one, short story, it's stapled in two parts. The first part came up Greek, legitimately.
Oh,
I couldn't read it, and Deb was nice enough to get us a copy that was in English. So that copy reads, a similar report published at T&F Online concludes that multiple studies on different types of Li-ion batteries showed the presence of large amounts of toxic gases such as hydrogen fluoride, phosphoryl fluoride, and phosphorus pentafluoride. Additionally, carbonyl sulfide, diethyl carbonate, ethanol carbonate, and carbon monoxide all may be released in the event of a fire. Similarly, lithium iron phosphate batteries, while somewhat less volatile than lithium-ion batteries, can produce fires that release a mix of toxic gases into the air. Hydrogen fluoride is highly corrosive and toxic and causes several respiratory problems in heavy enough concentration. Phosphorus oxides can cause kidney failure and death, and carbon monoxide can cause dizziness, nausea, and may lead to death. Since there are various types of batteries used for utility scale energy storage, a county BESS ordinance needs to be both specific and comprehensive in its scope, including the following: wide setbacks from property line that are protective not only of neighboring residences but also animals in both domestic and irrigation wells. A supply of millions of gallons of water to keep burning containers cool over a long period of time while a fire burns out must be considered. 3 new 12-inch wells may have been mentioned as a possibility near Burr Oak. How would this affect irrigation and domestic wells in the area? How would this be regulated? Both stormwater erosion control and contaminant potentially highly toxic water from fire control must be regulated. Requirements for each of those must be detailed. Noise nuisance from utility scale battery energy storage comes from the inverters, transformers, and HVAC for container temperature control. Noise limits should be identified as average. They must be LMAX, which means the decibels cannot go above that set limit. LMAX 40 to 45 decibel A is recommended by experts who study health impacts from various levels of noise exposure. All area fire departments could be called to a fire or other event at a best facility, be specially trained annually at the operator's expense, not only the one or two fire departments that normally would be called to a specific location. Battery fires are very long burning and dangerous to first responders. Hazardous materials transportation, on-site use, and disposal must be addressed. Wear and damage to roads beginning with construction phase throughout the life of the facility and during decommissioning to ultimate site restoration must be detailed to ensure that the county does not pay for any road repairs or replacement of culverts, etc. Specific time limits such as 30 or 60 days for complying to any condition in the ordinance must be given, not the vague phrase within a reasonable time. The logical conclusion here should be that the utility scale battery facilities are uncharted territory for the county plan department and commissions, and a best ordinance that is highly protective of residents, livestock, properties, and soil and water is essential for Marshall County. The state has set some base guidance in HEA 1173, and even the author of the law has advised that counties can have an ordinance in place that exceeds these minimum standards. This cannot be put together during one or two meetings. It is the job and the duty of the Plan Commission and the commissioners to see to it that each and every section and point of any proposed draft of a best ordinance must be individually discussed and either okayed, not okayed, or sent back for editing and revision. There's no reason to rush this process. The moratorium is in place to provide the necessary time to create a top-tier ordinance. Gary and Katie Llewellyn, Culver. The next letter is Mary Falstich, 123 East Maple Street, Bremen, Indiana, 46506. I'm sorry I could not be here tonight in person. I had the privilege to live on a working dairy farm for many years. I love the country life along with the peace and quiet and the country walks down the road and through the fields. Beautiful sunrises and sunsets, listening to tractors from neighbors off in the distance, farm animals, and wildlife. I've attended meetings or watched online and am dumbfounded by the way elected officials have completely ignored the residents who put them in office. I would like to know how many of the solar employees live in the country, or do they all live in the city and know the ugly sight of PF solar panels will never affect them? If they do not know the country way of life, they have no idea of why we are all pushing back on this issue of solar panel fields of multiple acres. Why is there such a big push to get this passed now? Wouldn't it make more sense to have the moratorium put in place and both sides take a step back, get the chance to examine and explore more of this issue, more pros and cons or other possibilities, straighten out the he said, she said gossip? If this is so important, the solar panels need to come to Marshall County, and it is important for these companies to push their way on those who oppose them. Wouldn't you think everyone, both sides, take the time to make sure it's the right fit, right for all involved? Thank you, Mary Falstich. Then the last letter I have is to whom it may concern. As the person elected to be the state representative for Indiana's 20th district, I'm writing this letter in support of the new battery storage project in Marshall County. We have a battery storage project underway in LaPorte County, and as a result, I worked on legislation to protect Hoosiers regarding these emerging energy sources. I'm excited about battery storage potential for the state and our country. I have toured an existing battery storage site and was comfortable with one being in my district. I encourage you to do the same. Indiana's legislation is the first and strongest in the nation as it adheres to the highest safety standards. Local government has the right to create zoning around battery storage. However, in drafting the regulations, we should allow projects to move forward, but drafted with Hoosier common sense. Respectfully submitted, Jim Pressel, State Representative, House District 20. And that is all I have.
You got anybody up here?
Did I make a motion to close the public hearing?
Yes. Have a motion and a second to close public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same. Public hearing is now closed. This is a lot of stuff, a lot of information. I can't make a motion, so I'm going to be very, very vocal about this. I think we need more time to look at what we're looking at here. Yeah, I appreciate, Ty, your work and your effort and a lot of detail, but oh my gosh, it's just too much to take in one night. And I appreciate both sides that have brought up some very good stuff. But I'd entertain a motion to at least table this for at least 1 month.
Well, I'd like, before we do that, though.
Sure.
There's probably, I don't know if anybody else has had any comments after hearing
Sure,
public
go
comments.
ahead.
But So one of the things that might be of value to Ty, if we send this back, if we end up voting to, was there was a comment about having the county commissioners approve bonds and financials on an ongoing basis, and there's an item in bonding, item 3, 4, and 5 puts the approval to the county commissioner. Is there a better way to do that? Is there a third party or another way of doing that that's more objective and perhaps not as subjective?
I
as
think some of
county
the other
commissioners?
people brought that up. They
Yeah, it was brought up. this
Yeah,
evening.
mentioned,
I'm
but
just-
who chooses the third party?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, or is that something we should take into consideration?
So in terms of who approves the bond?
Well, not the initial bond, but as far as the ongoing approval, after every 3 years, it needs to be adjusted for.
Make sure the bond meets the needs that what was originally intended. I think that's what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we can look into, and we can have a conversation
what
with the
I'm-
attorney to see
That's
what
what I'm asking, if it maybe,
options may be available, and we can definitely bring that back to you.
if there's other options, other ways of doing it.
Right. We could present you a host of options, and you can identify which one you believe is going to be in best desire for the
Okay.
community.
And can I piggyback on something you brought up, man? Somebody else brought up, and I thought it's probably automatically there, but we need to make sure we have protected the neighbors. If something does go wrong, that there's some liability insurance that covers their properties, no matter what they're, I think most companies have that automatically. I know when I was in charge, we had, and it's a lot of dollars, but it's just a natural thing. But I think we should, go ahead and have it in our orders so we check that, make sure they still covered it.
Yeah, I'm happy to add anything you desire to the ordinance. It's your ordinance at the end of the day. It's my job to get the ordinance started for you. But from that point forward, it's your ordinance that you're wishing to provide to the county commissioners. So if you're wanting something specific in there, you're wanting something researched, telling me the specific or the generality is going to be extremely beneficial. And at the end of the day, it's the commissioner's ordinance. So if they deem, like, you're not always going to agree with what I would recommend to give you in terms of options, that's fine. You're more than welcome to completely disagree, increase, double, triple, whatever you desire in relationship to that ordinance. It's yours. And at the end of the day, the commissioners don't necessarily have to agree with what you put forward as the plan commission. That's the beauty of it going through the different boards itself. But at the end of the day, whatever the commissioners want in the ordinance is what's going to end up being there, and it's going to come back around. And so you tell me what you want in this ordinance, and we can make it happen. Or if there's topics you want addressed, let me know so I can get a draft put together so you can review and make amendments to that. So you tell me.
Who went with me to the battery park over there in Columbia? Didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. I thought, one of the things I found to me encouraging, for lack of a better term, besides specific spacing between the containers and things like that, our ordinance does provide for that. I think I seen that pop up. But they had what I call underground protection. They put we'll call it a cement foundation, not just where the containers were. The whole area was contained, so if there was a spill of any kind of toxic materials, it would be maintained in that area. It couldn't get into the water streams. It couldn't get in. I thought that was kind of a neat thing to include that kind of requirement in this, no matter how big the park is. I don't care if the one we looked at was maybe an acre, maybe 2 at the most, and they had 5 or 6 containers, I think. But what they're proposing now, maybe more than that. But we need to have some kind of protection. Maybe you can't do that, but at least under each container, so anything that happens stays there.
Yeah, the secondary containment system was of interest to me too. And the other question I had, if they're using water, if there's a fire and they're using thousands of gallons of water, is that water contaminated? How does that work?
It can be, depending on, like, if you have chemicals that travel via water, it could pick those up. I can't say yes or I can't say no. It's all going to depend on what the battery chemistry is. It's going to have different relationships to it. But should there be chemicals within the battery system itself that get exposed and then get picked up by water, think about oils, it then begins to travel.
Could leach into the ground through the
Correct.
fire.
So
They were talking about the flow battery system. That just sounds archaic to me.
So I don't know what that containment system would look like for, to prevent that type of contamination, but at least we should think about it if that's something that.
Right, you can
should
put it
be in
as a
there.
requirement that there's some sort of containment and secondary containment system, and then it would be up to the developer to make it work.
Okay.
In terms to come up with that system itself, but you essentially set down the rule that you will have a standard containment system and a secondary containment system should the first fail.
Rhiann, go ahead.
Another thing I really liked about the Columbus was how they used gravel.
Oh, yeah.
Everywhere on top of that,
And that's
too.
it was like 8 or 10 foot of gravel, and
Yeah.
that I was impressed by how their containment was there. But I agree with your point. If they're dumping 30,000 gallons of water in a very short period of time, no matter how big we're going to have an issue. But so there may be ways they can filter or whatever it is, any runoff, but we need to look into it. Any more comments, questions? I appreciate everybody giving Ty some kind of, at least direction, what he should do next. What's your guys' plan?
So under these two choices, we're giving you information tonight, but we can still give you information subsequent to this meeting.
Of course.
That's my concern. I would like a little bit more time.
Yeah.
The things that have been brought up have been beneficial,
Yeah,
but I need to go home and read more, I guess.
amen.
Yeah.
So how do we achieve that? Do we achieve that by tabling, or do we just not take any action and have it?
You
come up
can
next?
table this discussion until the next meeting or a meeting you desire. So if you want 30 days and to come back in the March meeting and pick back up from here, we can do that. Or if you want to take 2 months, or what time frame you believe is going to be most beneficial to you.
Just as a comment, please, you guys do what you think's right. I'd like to at least postpone it for the month, but if you and I get together and we find 3 weeks from now he hasn't got enough information for us to even discuss it yet, we can delay it again. As setting up the agenda, him and I can go ahead and say, it's not going to be in next month's agenda. As long as I want to do it legal. I'm not talking about any slip of hand type stuff here.
I would recommend just setting a meeting that you want to bring it to? Because it sounds like in terms of the digest that you're wanting to do, you're going to come up with additional items of research. And so, say you were to go to April, which would be 2 meetings from now, I would work on the items you've given me as well as the items that have been brought up by the public and see how much of that I'm able to obtain and bring back for you and present that information. And you'll be able to take that as well as the information that you're of interest at that meeting. And then whatever's missing, we could go back to the drawing board in relationship to, hey, here's some of the missing stuff. So I won't get into the amendments until I've taken in your additional comments, if that makes sense.
Our moratorium's in place until
October 16th. I was going to make a comment. I'm not opposed to the April date, but we need to, there is a day when we either need to extend the moratorium
Yes.
or we're going to have
Yes.
no moratorium. So
Yeah,
we just
'cause
need
of
to
the-
keep that in mind. I don't want to fiddle around for months and months.
Right. A zoning ordinance update can take anywhere between 3 and 9 months. It all
Right.
depends on, like we had the 24 PC04. It's a relatively simple amendment to the zoning ordinance, but it's still no different, and it gets closer to that 3-month mark in relationship to from the time of initial proposal to the meeting itself, getting through the planning commission and the county commissioners. And then the more complicated the project, the longer it takes. And so, like the initial round on solar, not including the research end of it, you're looking at 9 months. Getting into battery, it's been on moratorium 3-4 months before we got in to give you your initial proposal, which got us here to today. So
I mean, I don't want to rush it either.
No,
We
not
just
at
need
all.
to- We can't, just push it off indefinitely
No.
either. Or, I mean, we can always extend
I
the
mean-
moratorium if we need to.
this summer, you could definitely look at, should you still not be satisfied with the ordinance itself, to send to the county commissioners. At that point, I would almost recommend looking at doing an extension of sorts to the moratorium. Because again, 3 months being the short end of it, we've got to prepare that documentation, get it to you, get it to the commissioners, get it passed on readings. And when you get to summer, October comes incredibly fast at that point.
Mr. Chairman, I move to table 24 PC 05 to the April meeting in order to take in this evening's information under advisement and to digest this information further.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second to table this until the April meeting. I think we do a roll call vote on this one, please.
Can I say one thing before?
Yes.
So if we do think of more as we've studied, do you want us to bring it just by an email or?
You can send it to me in email if you wish, or if you want to collectively send it to me or provide it to me in April, that would be sufficient as well. Or, I mean, we have a case in March. If you wanted to provide, hey, in the last month, I've come up with these items, Ty, I want you to include this in your research to bring in April. I think that would be the most proper route. So if you have an update in your research that you would like me to jump into, let me know then. And I'll anticipate trying to get you as much information as humanly possible. If I get you all of it in April, I'll get you all of it in April. But if we need additional time to finish out that research, I'll let you know that at the April meeting itself. But I won't plan to make any adjustments to the ordinance, just simply provide you another slideshow on research from today forward. Now it's vote, sir.
Yes.
Mrs. Barnhart.
Yes.
Mr. Cultice.
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Lonecker.
Yes.
Mr. Hostetler.
Yes. That concludes what we were going to discuss on the batteries. Do you have any other items we need to bring before everybody?
I do briefly, getting into the 2023 Plan Commission and BZA annual report. You have copies of that document. And then just to kind of run through that with you briefly, if you want me to slow down, let me know. I think this is the third presentation out of 4 for this. Jumping into the annual report, you can get to page 3. You're getting into the quarterly report for the last 3 years and the quarterly value comparison for the last 3 years. First and second quarter for permit numbers were a little down, and then we kind of raised up a little bit getting into third and fourth quarter. So we're still pretty on par in relationship to the last 3 years. But the value in comparison between the last 3 years is up dramatically, and a lot of that can be attributed to the cost of materials and a couple of projects that have come in that are pretty substantial in size. But a lot of builders and homeowners are feeling a hurt with the increase in price for the materials. Moving on to the 15-year comparison, you've seen a trend for the last several years upward. We've kind of not necessarily stalled, but plateaued around the 1,100, sub 1,100 mark in relationship to the last 5 years. Just to kind of compare that, you're sitting at just over 1,000 permits a year. And so everything's continued to trend upwardly in that same time frame, kind of towards the middle of that chart. You've acquired additional permitting authority in the other jurisdictions, including Argus, Culver, Bourbon, and Bremen. And so that's an attribution to those aspects. When you get into the comparison by jurisdiction over the 1098 permits, 56% of those are for the county, 44% divided up along the municipalities, 19.5% in relationship to Culver, Bremen at 9.9, Argus at 7.8, and Bourbon at 6.8. When you get into the valuation breakdown for that as well, those permits have stayed relatively the same, but the valuations always continue to go up. And from 2 years ago to last year, it's nearly doubled in valuation. Again, a part of that's going to be in relationship to the cost of construction, but there's also several projects that were very expensive and large, namely Sequel Wire has implemented a massive building expansion that's taken them across the road to the east. Southwire, sorry. Thank you. Sequel's the spinoff in Argus. Then kind of getting into the rest of the meat and potatoes of the annual report, getting into the BZA cases, they've reduced from 56 to 43 over the last year. Planning Commission cases tripled in 23 from 6 in the previous year to 18 last year. Splits have reduced a bit from 78 to 51. And then kind of from a work report standpoint, 2023, we spent a lot of time in the beginning of the year on the subdivision ordinance, and we're about halfway through it, but halfway through the year, the solar ordinance kind of came back and was in full focus. So that's still kind of wrapping up its processes. It's currently at the commissioners. And we also went through and placed a battery storage ordinance for a moratorium. Getting into 2024, talking a little bit more about our work program. Solar farm's kind of wrapping up, but it all depends on what the commissioners end up wanting to do at the end of the day. They tell us they want to update and change an ordinance. We'll bring that back to you. You'll end up making a recommendation affirming or denying, those sorts of things. It's their ordinance. They can tell me to put anything into it, and we'll bring it back to you. It's their ordinance at the end of the day. I just carry it from board to board. We're currently getting into the battery storage proposal immediately. And then the communication towers, there's an interest in getting into those because there's some matters within the state and federal regulations that are not, have not been adjusted in our local zoning ordinance that we need to make some updates on, and those have been around for the last 5 to 10 years. We weren't aware of it until last year, I believe, early or late 22. Carbon sequestration is a new interest that came in late last year. There's been some interest in looking into that. Not a lot of research has been done on it, but it'll be one of the next few ordinances, and that's coming from Stan Klotz with the commissioners to take a look into that. And again, wanting to wrap up the subdivision ordinance, because as you've seen tonight, there's one of the items that was there. He was put through an additional process that didn't necessarily make a lot of sense for as simple as moving a lot line, but because of the zoning district in which he was located, he had to go through that process and procedure. And so there should be some simplicities that we should be able to write into the subdivision ordinance for especially situations like that, just like the ag district that would have been across the street from him. An additional item that was brought up that didn't make it into the annual report is interest in data centers. And so I indicated that I bring a basic slide series in next month to just share what we have on track, and we'll make that an additional item for you to take interest in and let me know what you think. And then we'll kind of hold on to that until the timing becomes available to actually work into that ordinance itself. And then I didn't have this as a part of the presentation, but at the very end of your packet, you're going to have an appendix to the annual report that kind of goes over what funding came in at $144,000 and how that all breaks down to fees, violation reimbursement, hearing, subdivision costs, contractor registration, town collections, and what that grand total is once you kind of sum all those answers up. That is everything for the annual report. And kind of getting into the next meeting, we'll have a meeting March 28th at 7 p.m. That's all I have.
I got one question. Are we going to talk about the issue that Mr. Stackhouse brought up at the last meeting?
So we did have some research brought in on that, and there's some additional research that I need to do.
Okay.
We managed to narrow down. It was mentioned in a presentation in 1 minute set very briefly. So I'm hoping to dive into some more stuff around that time frame to see if we can get some more information to populate, but it may be very sparse. Because the minutes for that essentially made mention that this is one of the proposals when they were reviewing it in 2007, but there wasn't a whole lot of additional comment on it because it was a part of about a dozen other proposed amendments at that same discussion. So it's not as detailed as we were hoping, but I'm hoping to see if we can uncover some additional information from almost 2 decades ago.
Okay, thank you.
Move to close the meeting.
I have a motion to close the meeting.
I'll second.
And a second to close. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.